Welcome back to the Wonder Walkers channel, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about things that we learned in both South Korea and Japan.
So first off, we'll start with South Korea, and I think for me, South Korea was a place that I didn't really know that much about, and I'd always just kind of assumed that it was similar to Japan. I've read a lot on North Korea, and I'd watched a lot of documentaries on North Korea and the political situation there and everything that's kind of going on. So I had a fair bit of, I guess, knowledge about North Korea, but South Korea was kind of just that place that I didn't really know too much about. So I think going over there, I didn't really have too many preconceptions of what it was going to be like. I didn't really know what to expect at all. And when I went to South Korea for the first time, I think going in, especially just like going to land on the plane, it didn't look like a lot of other Asian cities that I'd been to. I think back to when I've been to Singapore, and Singapore is quite, it's very beautiful, but it's very small, it's very compact, as is Hong Kong. Hong Kong is very, very compact, and there's a lot of buildings there. It's big, it's just this huge like melting pot of like East and West. And for me, like Seoul, especially walking around there for the first time, it was so clean and so spread out. Like everything's spread out there. The buildings are spread out. You've got so much room to walk. Yeah, it's like, it's a huge, huge city. When you actually look at it on a map and when you see it, it's big. But it's really nicely set out in that sense, where you don't feel like you're walking on top of other people, they're walking on top of you. You've kind of got your own space there. And it's a really nice feeling, and there's just so much about Seoul that I just didn't expect, and I didn't expect it to be this beautiful, clean, pristine city. I think a lot of big cities find it very hard to bring nature into the cities a little bit more and to really clean them up. I think cities always, no matter where you are, it kind of has that issue. I mean, Sydney has that issue. And probably even Melbourne does to an extent, but Seoul I just found to be impeccably clean, and it was really lovely to see how well it is kept, and everything kind of has that newish kind of feel about it. I didn't see too many old traditional buildings there. Everything kind of has a very new feel to it, although they do have the shrines and some of the temples and palaces in between some of those buildings, which is really beautiful, and I really loved that about Seoul. So I think that was one thing that I learned going into Seoul for the first time. What did you think?
Just like Kaylee, I didn't have any preconceptions about Seoul because I don't know anyone that has actually been there. I've never really asked or like got recommendations, or you know, people like, oh, you gotta see this, gotta see that. Like I had no expectations of it as well. So when I got there, the first thing I noticed was very, very clean, like Kaylee said. Very wide walkways, very wide roads. Even things like traffic. So when there's traffic, no one's beeping, whereas here in Australia, it's like everyone's so impatient when they're driving. Everyone's beeping, everyone's cutting people off. In South Korea, in Seoul, people cutting everyone off everywhere we go.
It's like organised chaos.
No beeping whatsoever. Everyone's just like, oh yeah, come on in, like cutting.
Yeah.
Another thing I noticed was how much they love their country. You could see like on every corner there was a South Korean flag everywhere, like in 2 or 3 like together. Like every corner there was always a flag there. I feel like the South Koreans are very proud of their country, and when we were there they actually had a bit of like election stuff coming up because of their previous prime minister or president. I'm not too sure about the politics, but was impeached for bribery. So they did have a lot of that, and you could see posters everywhere, and everyone was like really keen on like voting and making their country kind of move forward. And that was one thing that I really noticed about Seoul as well, and I'm assuming it would be very similar in other parts of the country as well.
And one thing we noticed about Seoul as well, in terms of transportation, it's great. I mean, like taxis are so cheap there, so cheap, and it's such a big, wide city that sometimes you do feel like you need to get, because when we stayed in Gangnam, which is on the south side, and we had to get to the north side a lot of the time, so taxis were a breeze, you know, like they were really cheap. That was one thing we definitely noticed in comparison to Tokyo and Japan in general. Definitely a lot cheaper with taxis, but also the public transport system there with their metro system is just impeccable. Like, it's so easy. And we looked at the map first off of the system that they had there, the metro, and we were kind of like, oh god, this is going to be really hard to work out. There was so many different lines, and it was kind of a bit intimidating at first to look at, but once you actually get started with it, it is so easy. And there's no waiting for trains. Like, you pretty much just, there's no timetables, you just sort of turn up and then there'll be a train there in a few minutes. So I really enjoyed that about Seoul, that it was just so easy to get around no matter where you stayed, I think.
Another thing that I really noticed, and I'm assuming that Kaylee did as well, was when here in the West, we're always talking about, like, you know, what Kim Jong-un's done and what North Korea's done and how we're all afraid and whatever. And I felt like when I was there, I felt so safe in Seoul. There was always police, you saw police everywhere. Not like over the top, like they were just kind of walking around or whatever. Never felt unsafe in Seoul whatsoever. Even when we went to the DMZ, I feel like, yeah, there's this misconception that there's, like, you know, barbed wires everywhere, and there's like military, and there's going to be like tanks, and like it looks like there's going to be like a war start any second. And when we were at the DMZ, it did not feel like that at all.
No.
In South Korea, it feels, especially at the DMZ, it felt like they're more ready for reunification, like more educating people about reunification rather than war and what's happened in the past. Like they kind of want to move away from that and reunify as one country.
Yeah,
like,
and it was quite sad actually going, and I think this is why we didn't hear too much about North Korea at all when we were in Seoul. And I don't think we were on a bit of a tour actually, and our tour guide was saying that a lot of people don't like to talk about it because it is quite painful for them. They have a lot of family that are stuck on the North Korean side that they will probably never see again. So it's really hard to sort of get that through our heads, I think, as well, because we've just been told by the media so much that, you know, they just want to, you know, both countries are just so in so much tension at the moment, and they just want to have a war basically. And it's not like that at all, really. It's almost the opposite. It just seemed like they wanted to move towards reunification, and seeing the train station there that's kind of already built, and that one day they're hoping to link that up to the Trans-Siberian railways, and that's really cool to see that go through North Korea, through Pyongyang, and that would be amazing one day. I think they're really hoping for that. So it definitely wasn't as militarized as I thought it was going to be. I mean, demilitarized zone kind of says that it's not, but it's different to what I've seen before in photos and videos, and yeah, it was different. It's
really hard to explain. Like, yeah, I think you have to actually see it for yourself and like actually feel it. Like when you're seeing there's like this train station, and there's like, you know, there's like little messages of hope, like, yes, let's like reunify, and like there's people like personal wishes and stuff, and you can just feel that's what they really want. I just feel like here in the West we talk about how, you know, South Korea is probably just ready for war and ready to you know, I don't know. I feel like when I was in Seoul, I felt like we didn't really hear much about North Korea, but when you're in the West, you hear about it like on the news every day, and I feel like we're more scared of it down here and probably in the US than they are in South Korea. I felt like when we were there, like, these people have been living like this for their whole lives. They're used to it. They get threats all the time from the North, and we found that yeah, like I said, we feel like we're more scared of it in the West, even though we're so far away from it than what they are in Seoul particularly.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see that. We've also noticed, or I noticed in Seoul, and I kind of had, this was kind of the only thing that I knew about. So I knew about the skincare and the skincare brands that were huge over there, and that people really love to have a really good skincare routine, which is kind of sad actually, that that's one of the only things that I knew about South Korea before visiting there. But it's freaking amazing over there. When you see the amount of skincare places and makeup places, cosmetic places, it's like every second store is one, and I think there's such a emphasis on image over there and looking good and taking care of yourself, and really, like, I think so much is focused on facial features and things like that as well. And one thing that we realized when we were over there was that there was like 500, I think in our area alone, 500 cosmetic surgeons, cosmetic surgeries. So that was just insane. I mean, like, if I was going to get cosmetic surgery though, I'd be going there because they look like they do a great job over there. But I think we found out that it was like up to 1/3 of people living in Seoul have had a procedure done, which is just crazy. Because I mean, like, here in the West, it's like, I don't know, you're almost looked down upon if you have a cosmetic surgery or you get something altered or whatever. And it's like, over there it's just normal. It's just like an everyday thing, it's just interesting. It's interesting to see another side of that, because we really only see sort of one side of it over here, I feel.
Another thing that we really noticed and was really great in Seoul was how helpful and patient the people are. They're so nice. Like, we obviously can't speak Korean. We learn like the basics, like hello and goodbye and thank you and those sorts of things. And you could tell, like, we were butchering their language completely. They were probably like, what the hell are they saying? But we still tried, and they were so patient. Like, I don't know, it's hard to explain. They could tell that we were trying, and I think that was the main thing. We were trying to kind of communicate like the basics to them, and I think they really did respect that. And even just like ordering food, I mean, we obviously can't speak Korean, and they gave us like menus in English a lot of the time. When we didn't even ask, we were happy to look at the Korean one.
Yeah, and even when I had an incident happen with my passport, they were so patient, and I had to go and get a police report, and the police were just so helpful. And I mean, I was struggling to communicate with them, and they were so patient, so patient with me. And I was really appreciative of that stage, because obviously I wasn't in a great headspace for this particular incident, but it was really good to know that they were actually not just sort of passing me off or whatever and didn't care. They were really helpful, and I found that in general in Seoul and South Korea that people are very helpful. And I think whenever I travel to Asia, it always gets me that, I don't know, like, the fact that so many people over there know English. And here specifically in Australia and a lot of the other countries in the West, we don't know any other language but English. And it's so interesting to see that when we go to other countries, particularly in Asia, we can speak English to them. But when they come here, and particularly like with Mandarin speakers, which Mandarin is the biggest language on the planet, not anyone I know speaks Mandarin who's Australian. And it's crazy because when they come here, they are forced to speak English. When we go over there, we're not forced to speak Chinese or South Korean or whatever. We just speak English. So I've always found that kind of interesting and a little bit sad at the same time, because I feel like maybe we should have more emphasis on languages in the West, or in Western countries, I should say, because Australia's not really in the West technically, but yeah, you guys get what I mean.
Now we'll talk about things that we learned about Japan. One thing I think both of us can agree on is it's not as weird as you actually think. Like, you see on the news and on the TV and internet and whatever, like, you know, they've got these weird ass inventions and these weird things, and it's like a weird country, weird people, and I didn't feel like that at all. It just felt like it was like normal. Yeah,
that's a really big thing, I think, because it's a country that we've always wanted to go to for a really long time, and we knew quite a bit of what to expect, I think, over there already. So I guess going over there for us, we'd probably become a bit numb to the fact of certain things like being weird or whatever, and we just didn't see it as being that weird because we already kind of expected it. But yeah, I think overall it wasn't as wacky and crazy as I thought it was going to be, particularly Tokyo, which I'd heard was just this insane city with weird things everywhere, and it wasn't that weird for us. Like, Tokyo was really cool, and it's so cool to see Asian cities, particularly at night, and Tokyo at night, just with the signage and the billboards and everything, was just so cool. But yeah, we just didn't, I mean, even the vending machine thing, kind of like after the while was like normal. There were so many vending machines everywhere for everything. But yeah, what did you think?
Another thing that we learned about Japan is smoking. I never realized how big smoking actually was in Japan. So we call the bullet train between cities, and even on the trains they have smoking rooms. In a lot of restaurants they have smoking rooms. When you go to like even a takeaway restaurant like Moss Burger, we would be asked at the counter if we wanted smoking or a non-smoking seat. It's so big over there. Like,
Yeah,
they
it's
have
crazy.
they have like smoking advertisements and like smoke shops, and there's people piling in there. Like, I never realized how big the smoking culture was in Japan until I actually saw it. And
Yeah.
we as non-smokers like saw smoking everywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's so crazy because like you always picture Japan, and it's just such a clean, pristine looking country, and you don't expect there to be just like thousands of smokers like all the time along the streets. And there are a lot of non-smoking places, so I think they've really designated everything quite well for the most part. But yeah, it was just interesting to see how big of a thing it is over there to smoke. So actually overall, Tokyo is one of those places that I'd always wanted to go, and I think Dan too. And
Definitely.
we had so many expectations, I think, of it, and maybe this is what hindered it in the end. But for me, I thought I was going to really enjoy Tokyo a lot more than what I did in Seoul, and I would almost say that it was kind of the opposite. Even with the incident with my passport there that happened in Seoul, and it kind of like dampened the mood for a few days, I still feel like Seoul was just, yeah, I don't know, like it's not that I liked it better, it's just that maybe the experience we had in Seoul was better, and we didn't get to do as much as we wanted to in Tokyo for several reasons. But maybe that was the issue, and maybe we just didn't get to see as much of Tokyo as what we wanted to. I feel like we were confined at times to Shibuya and Shinjuku, so I think that's maybe part of the reason we didn't maybe enjoy it as much as we thought we were going to.
After Tokyo, we caught the bullet train to Hiroshima, and you know, I wanted to go to Hiroshima just to learn a bit more about the history of like the A bomb, and it ended up being my favorite, and I think Kaylee's favorite place in Japan as well that we saw. Like, we didn't see a lot of Japan, obviously. It's a fairly big country, but Hiroshima was just so interesting.
So beautiful, yeah.
Such a beautiful city. Everyone was really nice. Like, really dark history, of course, and you could just feel like the sadness of that of what happened, and you could almost felt like you could hear like screams and that sort of thing. Like, it was
pretty harrowing.
Yeah, it was quite
like, and going into the museum as well was really sad. It was probably one of my favorite experiences though, to go in and learn a little bit more about it. But overall, it's such a peaceful kind of city.
Yeah, definitely. Everywhere it's kind of like they really want that peace, like disarmament kind of thing, and you see it everywhere. And one thing I really loved about Hiroshima is, I don't know, it just, like, they have their really dark history, but they've moved forward, and you see the city now, and it's like progressed. Like, there's more than 1 million people living there. It's such a nice big city now. It's like thriving, and there's so much to do there. I wasn't expecting there to be as much in Hiroshima. I was just expecting it to be kind of like, you learn a bit about the history and then you move on. And I kind of wish we had more time there, because I feel like we didn't get to see as much as we like, just because we had that misconception that it was just a place where you see the A-bomb dome, and that was about it.
So yeah, Hiroshima was probably our favorite place on the trip, which was surprising, and it was just a nice change from Tokyo. It was a little bit smaller of a city, not as fast paced, and just really beautiful overall, so I'd definitely go back there. And the shopping was actually kind of good too. It was surprising because I thought it was going to be a bit less, but I think there was more like independent labels and things like that there, which was kind of trendy and kind of cool. But yeah, our next place that we went to was Kyoto. And Kyoto was just one of those places that I feel like we should have had more time in. We definitely should have made more time for it, because I did love Kyoto as well. I thought that was great, and I loved the city, and I loved visiting the shrines and the temples there. We just didn't have enough time really to visit everything that we wanted to. One thing we did find with Kyoto was that there were a lot of tourists there, which is obviously, you know, not very surprising, but just a lot of people there. So it was pretty crazy to see that. We hope you enjoyed this video.
If you enjoyed the video, please like below and comment with some feedback and suggestions. But until next time, thank you so much for watching.
Thanks guys, bye.